There is something that almost no one in this space will admit to you, and I am going to say it right now, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. Most of the time, when someone sits down to record a message like this one, they already know who they are talking to. They know because they have met you before, not in person, but in the pattern. They have seen the way you show up, quietly, without announcement, carrying something heavy that you have never quite been able to name. And they record the message anyway, hoping the words will land, hoping you will feel seen. But what they rarely say out loud is this: they are also a little in awe of you, not because your life looks easy, it does not, but because you are still here, you are still listening, you are still reaching, even when everything around you has gone quiet and the reaching feels like it is going nowhere. That is not ordinary. That is not something everyone does. And before this message goes any further, I want you to sit with that for just a moment, because what you are about to hear is not for everyone. It is for you specifically, and the fact that you are here tonight is not an accident. Tonight is not a regular night. I want you to feel the weight of that sentence before I move past it. There are nights that simply pass, hours that accumulate into days without leaving a mark, evenings where you close your eyes and nothing has shifted. Tonight is not one of those nights. Something is different about the air around this message, around this moment, around the particular collection of minutes that brought you here to hear these words. You may not be able to explain it yet. You may have even tried to talk yourself out of it, told yourself you were being dramatic, reminded yourself that things do not just change overnight. But something in you did not listen to that voice. Something in you kept moving toward this moment anyway. That part of you, the part that kept moving, is the part I am speaking to tonight. Now I want to describe something to you, and I want you to notice whether it sounds familiar. There are people who carry a quiet, knowing that something greater is coming for their life, and they have carried it for so long that they have started to wonder if they imagined it. They wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose that does not yet have a name. They look at the ordinary details of their day and feel a strange, persistent ache, not because life is terrible, but because something in them knows that this is not the full picture. They dream in a language that feels bigger than their current circumstances. They feel things more deeply than the people around them seem to. They have a sensitivity that others sometimes mistake for weakness, but that is actually a form of perception, a way of reading the world that most people never develop. They have been told they are too much, and they have also been told they are not enough, often by the same people, sometimes on the same day. Does that sound like someone you know? I thought so. I thought so because I am describing you. You are what some would call a chosen one. And I know that phrase can sound large and unfamiliar when you first hear it aimed at you, because you have spent most of your life being told in various ways that you were not chosen, that you were overlooked, that the things you wanted were for other people. But the truth that I am admitting to you tonight, the thing that does not get said enough, is that the overlooking was never the final word. It was a chapter. It was never the book. There are specific signs that mark the life of someone like you, and I want to name them one by one so that you can stop second-guessing what you have been experiencing. The first sign is that your dreams have been getting clearer, not more peaceful necessarily, but more vivid, more directional, as if something is trying to show you a map while you sleep. The second sign is that you have been carrying a frustration that you cannot fully explain to anyone around you, not because you lack the words, but because the frustration is not really about what is on the surface. It is about the gap between where you are and where you know you are supposed to be. The third sign is that certain relationships, certain environments, certain versions of your old life have started to feel genuinely uncomfortable in a way they did not before, as if you have outgrown a room and the walls are starting to press in. The fourth sign is that you keep receiving the same message from different directions. A word in a song, a phrase in a conversation, a sentence in something you read by chance, all pointing toward the same thing, all arriving in the same season. The fifth sign is that despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the uncertainty and the waiting, you have not given up. You are here. That is the most undeniable sign of all. Heaven has not been ignoring you. Let me be clear about that. What has looked like silence has been something else entirely. It has been preparation. It has been the careful, deliberate, loving work of a God who does not rush what is meant to last. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not the exception to the promise. You are the living proof of it. And tonight, this message, this moment, this exact combination of words reaching your ears at this exact point in your life is not random. You were not almost ready. You were ready the moment you showed up here. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. If part one named something you have been carrying, then what comes next is going to go even deeper, because naming the sign is only the beginning. What matters now is that you understand what the sign means, what it has been costing you, and why the cost was not wasted. There is a particular kind of pain that belongs exclusively to people in your position, and it is the kind of pain that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not felt it. It is not the pain of tragedy. It is not the pain of loss in the obvious sense. It is the pain of proximity, of being so close to the life you were made for that you can almost touch it, and then watching the days pass without the gap closing. That is its own specific ache. And almost nobody talks about it honestly, because it does not photograph well, and it does not fit neatly into a conversation. So people like you learn to carry it quietly. You learn to smile at the right moments. You learn to say, "I am fine," with enough conviction that people stop asking. And the loneliness of that, the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who cannot see what you are carrying, is something I want to acknowledge right now before we go any further. You have not been imagining it. The weight is real. The ache is real. And tonight, I want to name 4 things that you have been experiencing in this season. 4 signs that are specific to people who are standing exactly where you are standing right now, at the edge of the greatest chapter of their lives, without yet being able to see the page turn. The first thing you have been experiencing is a sudden, unexpected wave of sadness about the past. Not a general sadness, a specific one. It arrives without warning, sometimes in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, sometimes right before you fall asleep. And it brings with it a grief that feels disproportionate to the moment. You find yourself thinking about a version of your life that did not happen, about choices that led you somewhere different from where you intended, about people you used to be close to who are now strangers. And the sadness is confusing because you cannot always identify what triggered it. What I want you to know is that this sadness is not a regression. It is not you falling apart. It is your soul doing an inventory. It is the necessary clearing that happens before something new is built. The grief you are feeling about the past is making room. It is removing what no longer fits so that what is coming has somewhere to land. The second thing you have been experiencing is that familiar places and familiar people have started to feel heavy and strange. Places you used to love now feel slightly off, as if the frequency has shifted and you can no longer quite tune in. People you have known for years now seem to speak a language that is adjacent to yours but not quite the same. Conversations that used to feel nourishing now feel draining. And this is deeply disorienting because nothing dramatic has happened to cause it. Nobody has wronged you in an obvious way. The environment has not changed in any visible sense. You have changed. You are changing. And the discomfort you feel in spaces that once fit you perfectly is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you have grown beyond them, and growth always feels like loss before it feels like freedom. The third thing you have been experiencing is a recurring dream, or a recurring image, or a recurring sense of standing in front of a door that has not yet opened. Some of you will know exactly what I mean, because the dream is literal. There is a door, and you are standing in front of it. And in the dream, you can feel that something extraordinary is on the other side, but your hand will not quite reach the handle, or the handle will not quite turn. Others of you will recognize this not as a sleep experience, but as a waking one, a persistent sense that you are on the threshold of something, that the thing you have been waiting for is right there, right on the other side of whatever is next. And that the waiting is the most unbearable part because you can feel the proximity without being able to close the distance. That feeling is not a trick. That feeling is a compass. What you can sense but not yet see is real, and the fact that you can sense it means you are already close enough to feel it. The fourth thing you have been experiencing is that the same message keeps finding you in different forms. You hear a phrase in a sermon that stops you mid-sentence. You read a line in a book that feels like it was written about you specifically. A stranger says something in passing that lands with the weight of a word you have been waiting years to receive. A song comes on at exactly the moment you needed to hear it, and you have started to wonder whether you are making connections that are not really there. Whether you are so desperate for a sign that you are manufacturing them from coincidence. I want to tell you with full confidence that you are not manufacturing anything. When the same message arrives from multiple directions in a concentrated period of time, that is not coincidence. That is communication. Something is trying to get your attention, and it has been trying for a while. Now I want to talk about the specific pains that come with this season, because the signs I just described do not arrive without a cost, and I will not pretend otherwise. The insomnia is real. The 3 a.m. wakefulness, the kind where your mind will not stop rehearsing every unresolved question in your life, is one of the most consistent experiences among people in this particular season. The loneliness is real, not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of being misunderstood, of having a vision that no one around you can quite see, of speaking from a depth that others cannot always meet. The feeling of being wronged is real too. The sense that certain opportunities passed you by, that certain doors closed before you had a fair chance, that certain people did not treat you with the honor you deserved, and the feeling of being misunderstood, of having your sensitivity labeled as weakness, your discernment labeled as paranoia, your dreams labeled as impracticality. That is perhaps the heaviest thing of all. But here is the thing I need to reframe for you, because the way you have been interpreting this season is costing you something you cannot afford to keep spending. You have been reading this period of your life as punishment, as if the waiting, the delay, the closed doors, the silent seasons are evidence that you are not favored, not chosen, not worthy of the breakthrough you have been praying toward. And I understand why it feels that way. When something goes on long enough without resolution, the human mind begins to look for an explanation, and the cruelest explanation it can generate is that you deserved it. You did not deserve the silence. You were not punished with the waiting. You were positioned with it. There is a profound difference between being overlooked and being positioned. And I need you to feel that difference in your body, not just in your mind. Someone who is overlooked has been passed by. The opportunity moved without them. The door opened and closed before they could reach it. They are behind, and catching up requires extraordinary effort. That is not your story. Someone who is positioned has been placed, deliberately, with intention, with foreknowledge of what is coming and what will be required to receive it well. The waiting you have endured was not the universe forgetting you. It was God positioning you. Every year that felt like loss was a year of preparation. Every season that felt like isolation was a season of formation. You were not left behind. You were being assembled for an arrival that required everything you went through to become everything you now are. You are not someone who was ignored. You are someone who was placed in exactly the right position at exactly the right time. And that time is not somewhere in the vague future. That time is now, this season, this chapter, the one that begins tonight. If something in these words has found the part of you that has been waiting to be found, I want to invite you to do something simple. Type the word "ready" in the comments right now. Not because it is a ritual, not because the word itself carries power in some mystical sense, but because the act of declaring it, of moving your fingers and putting that word into the world, is the first step of claiming what belongs to you. You are ready. You have always been ready. Say it where someone can see. And if this message is reaching you at a moment when you feel like you cannot give much, I want to ask you something gently. This channel exists because people like you exist. People who need to be found by words like these at exactly the right moment. Every message that gets made, every hour that goes into crafting something that can meet you where you are, is sustained by a community that believes this work matters. If you believe it matters, if these words have done something real for you, tonight consider supporting this work with whatever you are able to give. It does not have to be large. It never has to be large. A small act of generosity from someone who has been given something real is one of the most powerful things in the world. There is a link available to you. If you feel moved, use it. And if you are not in a position to give financially right now, then like this video, share it with one person who needs to hear it, and subscribe so that the next message can find you. Just as this one did. None of that is for me. All of it is so that the next chosen one, who is sitting in the dark at 3 a.m, can find their way to a moment like this one. You are not alone in this room. You never were. Something shifted in you as you read those last words, or heard them land, and I want you to stay inside that shift, rather than letting the moment pass the way so many moments have passed before. There is a pattern that belongs to people in your position, and it goes like this. Something opens. Something cracks the surface just enough for light to get in, and then the ordinary world rushes back in to fill the gap before the light has a chance to take hold. A notification arrives. A responsibility pulls at your attention. The practical demands of your life reassert themselves, and the moment of opening closes before it ever had the chance to become something lasting. Tonight, I am asking you not to let that happen. I am asking you to stay here, in this space, for just a little longer, because what I am about to give you is not a concept. It is a practice. It is something you can do, something you can begin today, something that costs you nothing but 7 minutes and a willingness to be still. Before I give you the practice, I want to say something about the nature of tools. Most people, when they are in a season like yours, go looking for the largest possible intervention. They want the dramatic transformation, the overnight reversal, the moment where everything changes at once. And I understand that impulse completely. Because when you have been waiting as long as you have, the desire for a sudden and total shift is one of the most human things imaginable. But the truth about how deep transformation actually works is quieter and more precise than that. The most powerful changes in a human life do not begin with a dramatic event. They begin with a single deliberate act, repeated consistently, in alignment with something that is already moving inside you. What I am giving you tonight is not the whole journey. It is the first step, taken well, taken honestly, taken with the full weight of your intention behind it. The tool I want to introduce you to is called the Daily Threshold Practice. I chose that name deliberately because a threshold is not a destination. It is a point of crossing, and everything about where you are right now, everything about this season, this message, this moment, is oriented around a crossing. You are not trying to build something from nothing. You are trying to cross from one version of your life into another, from the chapter that has been defined by waiting into the chapter that is defined by arrival. The Daily Threshold Practice is designed to do exact that, to make the crossing not as a single dramatic leap, but as a daily, deliberate, conscious movement toward everything that is already moving toward you. It has 3 steps, and each one matters. None of them requires special equipment. None of them requires prior experience with meditation, or prayer, or any particular spiritual tradition. None of them requires you to be in a specific place, or to have a specific amount of time blocked out. You can do this in the morning before anyone else wakes up. You can do this in your car before you walk into work. You can do this in the evening when the house is finally quiet. What matters is not the location. What matters is the intention you bring to it. Step 1 is this. Before you do anything else in the practice, before you close your eyes or adjust your breathing, or begin any form of stillness, you are going to remember one thing you are grateful for that did not happen. I want to be specific about what that means, because gratitude for the things that did occur is something most people understand. What I am asking for is different. I am asking you to identify one thing, one specific thing that you wanted very badly at some point in your life and that did not come to pass, and to find within that absence something to be genuinely thankful for. This is not spiritual bypassing. I am not asking you to pretend the loss did not hurt. I am asking you to look at it long enough and honestly enough to see what the closed door protected you from, or what it redirected you toward, or what it made possible that would not have been possible if you had gotten what you asked for. Think of the relationship that ended and left you devastated, and ask yourself honestly where that relationship was actually going. Think of the job you did not get, the city you did not move to, the version of your future that did not materialize, and allow yourself to wonder, genuinely and openly, whether what did not happen was in some way a mercy. This step is not fast. Do not rush it. Sit with the specific thing you have chosen until you can feel something soften in your chest around it. That softening is not weakness. It is the release of a grip that has been costing you energy you need for what is coming. Step 2 follows directly from step 1, and it is built around a specific statement that I want you to say, either out loud or in the quietest possible interior voice, depending on where you are and what is around you. The statement is this: I am not late. I am not early. I am exactly where the next chapter begins. I want you to understand why this statement is the second step and not the first. Because if you say it before you have completed step 1, it will feel like a performance. It will feel like you are trying to convince yourself of something you do not yet believe. But if you say it after sitting honestly with the gratitude of the thing that did not happen, after allowing something to soften around a closed door from your past, then the statement lands differently. It lands in soil that has been prepared. The concept of time that underlies this statement is something I will go much deeper into later in this message. But for now, I want you to simply hold this idea. The timing of your life has not been governed by accident or by neglect. It has been governed by something more precise than a clock. You are not behind the schedule you imagined for yourself. You are exactly on time for the schedule that was written for you before you were born. Say the statement, mean it as much as you can, and then move into step 3. Step 3 is 7 minutes of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of absence, the silence of arrival, of being fully present inside a moment that matters, without trying to fill it, fix it, analyze it, or improve it. 7 minutes is a specific number, and I chose it for a reason that I will explain more fully in the section that follows this one, because the science behind what 7 minutes of intentional stillness does to the human brain is something I want to give proper space to. But for now, I want you to understand the practice itself. Set a timer for 7 minutes. Close your eyes if you are in a place where that is safe and appropriate. And for those 7 minutes, do only one thing. Breathe, and with each breath, repeat a single phrase internally. The phrase is this: I am open. I am ready. I am here. That is all. You do not need to visualize anything elaborate. You do not need to generate an emotional experience. You do not need to feel anything in particular. Your only job for those 7 minutes is to be present, to be still, and to repeat that phrase with as much genuine intention as you can bring to it, which on some days will be a great deal, and on other days will be just a whisper of willingness. Both are enough. The willingness is always enough. Now I want to speak to the part of you that is already composing objections, because I know you. I know the way your mind works in seasons like this, and I know that some part of you is already preparing to explain to yourself why you will not actually do this. You will tell yourself you do not have time, which is almost never literally true, but is always emotionally convincing. You will tell yourself that things like this do not work for people like you, that you have tried practices before and they did not produce results, that your situation is too complicated or too far gone or too specific for something this simple to make a difference. I want to respond to each of those objections with the same answer because they all have the same answer. 7 minutes is less time than you spend every day consuming content that leaves you feeling worse than when you started. 7 minutes is less time than a single scroll through a feed that reminds you of everything you have not yet achieved. You have 7 minutes. You have always had 7 minutes. What you have not always had is something worth spending those 7 minutes on. Now you do. And as for whether it works for people like you, I want to tell you something that the science will confirm in a few moments, but that I want you to feel before the science explains it. The particular kind of person you are, the one who feels things deeply, who carries a knowing that something greater is coming, who has been through seasons of waiting, that would have broken someone less equipped. That person is not harder to reach with a practice like this. That person is more ready for it. The sensitivity that has sometimes felt like a liability is actually a form of receptivity. You are wired to receive what this practice delivers. The question has never been whether you are capable. The question has only ever been whether you are willing. So tonight, after this message ends, before you move on to the next thing, I want you to try it. Step 1. One thing you are grateful for that did not happen. Step 2. I am not late. I am not early. I am exactly where the next chapter begins. 3. 7 minutes. Eyes closed. I am open. I am ready. I am here. That is the whole practice. That is the beginning of everything. And in the section that follows, I am going to tell you exactly what those 7 minutes are doing to your brain while you sit in that stillness. Because what the science has found about this particular window of time is something that will change the way you understand not just the practice, but yourself. You just learned a practice built around 7 minutes of intentional stillness. And I imagine part of you is curious about why that number specifically. Why not 10 minutes? Why not 20? Why not an hour of deep meditation, the way traditional spiritual disciplines have recommended for centuries? The answer is not arbitrary, and it is not marketing. The answer comes from decades of neuroscientific research into how the human brain actually shifts its operating frequency. And what I am about to share with you is going to reframe not just the practice you learned in the last section, but the entire way you understand your own mind and why people like you, chosen ones, people who carry the kind of sensitivity and depth and spiritual awareness you carry, tend to operate at a fundamentally different frequency than the people around them. Here is something that researchers in the field of neuroscience have been documenting for years. Something that spiritual traditions have described in their own language for thousands of years before the science caught up. People who are described as exceptionally creative, exceptionally intuitive, exceptionally capable of moments of sudden and profound insight, do not just think differently from the average person. Their brains literally operate at a different frequency, and the frequency that shows up most consistently in the brains of people having what scientists call peak cognitive experiences, moments of breakthrough clarity, sudden, creative solutions, deep intuitive knowing, is a specific brainwave pattern called gamma. Gamma waves operate at a high frequency, and they are associated with the kind of integrated, whole brain processing that most people only access in rare flashes, the sudden solution to a problem that has been stuck for weeks, the creative idea that arrives fully formed, the moment of clarity where everything that was confusing becomes instantly coherent. Those moments are not magic, though they can feel like it. They are a specific neurological event. And what is extraordinary is that people who are described as chosen, as set apart, as carrying a particular sensitivity and depth, tend to access that state more naturally than others. You are not imagining the way your mind works differently. The science has a name for it. The researcher who brought this understanding into a form that ordinary people could actually use is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers. Dr. Rivers spent more than 30 years studying the relationship between brainwave frequencies and human potential, work that was affiliated with some of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, including research connected to NASA's ongoing investigation into human cognitive performance under conditions of extreme pressure and isolation. What Dr. Rivers found over the course of those 30 years, through thousands of hours of research and brain imaging and frequency analysis, was both simple and revolutionary. The brain does not arrive at its highest states of performance through effort alone. In fact, effort, the kind of grinding, forcing, pushing that most people associate with productivity and achievement, actively suppresses the gamma state. The brain reaches its highest frequency not through force, but through a specific kind of guided relaxation, a deliberate shift in the brain's operating rhythm that allows the higher frequencies to emerge naturally. And the gateway to that shift, the specific neurological on-ramp that allows the brain to move from its ordinary, stressed and scattered state into the elevated gamma frequency, runs through a brainwave pattern called theta. Theta waves operate at a lower frequency, between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are associated with the state that exists at the border between waking and sleep, the dreamy, receptive, deeply creative state that children spend most of their time in, that adults almost never access, because the demands of daily life keep the brain locked into higher, faster, more anxious frequencies. Children learn at a rate that adults find astonishing precisely because their brains spend so much time in theta. The famous moments of insight that scientists and artists and inventors have reported throughout history, the ideas that arrived in dreams, the solutions that came during a quiet walk, the sudden clarity that appeared the moment they stopped trying. All of those moments have theta as their foundation. Theta is the doorway, and gamma is the room beyond it. What Dr. Rivers and his research team discovered is that the brain can be guided from its ordinary waking state into theta, and from theta into gamma through a precisely calibrated sequence of sound frequencies. This principle is called brainwave entrainment, and it works because of a fundamental property of the brain called frequency following response. When the brain is exposed to an external rhythm, a sound, a pulse, a carefully constructed audio frequency, it tends to synchronize its own electrical activity to match that external rhythm. This is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, reproducible neurological event. And what the research showed was that the optimal window for achieving a meaningful shift in brainwave frequency, long enough to produce a real change in the brain's operating state, but short enough to avoid the fatigue that comes with extended meditation, is approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes of precisely calibrated audio is enough to guide the brain from its stressed, scattered, high-frequency daily state down through theta and into the elevated gamma frequency, where your highest capabilities live. That is why the practice in the previous section is built around 7 minutes. It is not a number chosen for convenience. It is a number chosen by the data. The tool that Dr. Rivers developed to deliver this experience is called the Genius Wave, and it is a 7-minute audio track built on the principles of binaural beats and isochronic tones, sound frequencies that are calculated with a precision that no ordinary music or meditation audio achieves, because the goal is not relaxation for its own sake. The goal is a specific neurological state. When you listen to the Genius Wave through headphones, the audio delivers slightly different frequencies to each ear, and the brain, in the process of reconciling those two frequencies, naturally generates the exact brainwave pattern that the research identifies as the gateway to gamma. You do not have to concentrate. You do not have to meditate in any traditional sense. You do not have to have any prior experience with mindfulness or breath work or any other practice. You simply listen, and your brain does what it is always designed to do. It synchronizes. It elevates. It opens. I want to tell you about someone who came to the Genius Wave from a place that sounds remarkably like where you are right now. A woman who had spent years feeling the gap between where she was and where she knew she was supposed to be. She had the sensitivity, the depth, the quiet, knowing that something greater was meant for her life, but the years had accumulated without the breakthrough arriving. And she had reached the point where she was not quite ready to give up, but she was genuinely exhausted by the effort of continuing to hope. She started listening to the Genius Wave for 7 minutes each morning before she did anything else. Within the first 2 weeks, she noticed something she described as a clearing, not a dramatic event, not a sudden miracle, but a consistent sense that her thinking was less cluttered, that solutions to problems she had been circling for months were arriving more easily, that the creative ideas she had always had in theory were now becoming concrete and actionable in a way they had not been before. Within 3 months, she had launched something she had been planning for 2 years. Within 6 months, the income from that launch had changed the financial reality of her family. She did not attribute the change to magic. She attributed it to consistency, to showing up for 7 minutes every morning, to giving her brain the specific frequency it needed to operate at the level it was always capable of reaching. Now I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are sitting with a particular thought right now, and I want to name it before it becomes the reason you do not take this step. Some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing. And you are right, it is not nothing. $39 is a real amount of money, and I am not going to pretend otherwise or rush past that reality as if it does not matter. If you are in a season where $39 represents a genuine sacrifice, I want you to feel seen in that. The financial pressure that often accompanies the waiting season is one of its most grinding and relentless features, and the last thing I want to do is add to that pressure with a pitch that does not acknowledge it. So here is what I want you to weigh. Not what $39 costs you today, but what another year of operating below the frequency you were designed for costs you over time. What another year of scattered thinking, of creative potential that cannot quite crystallize into action, of knowing you are capable of more, but being unable to close the gap between the knowing and the doing. What does that year cost? In lost opportunities, in delayed breakthroughs, in the quiet erosion of confidence that comes from watching time pass without the change you have been working toward arriving. That is the real cost calculation. And when you run those numbers honestly, $39 is a different kind of number. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for just $39. That price is available for a limited time and for a limited number of people, because the offer was designed to create access for people who are in this specific season, people who are ready to receive what this tool delivers, but who need the barrier to be as low as possible. The program comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience what the Genius Wave does for your mind, your focus, your creativity, and your sense of direction. And if at the end of those 90 days, you do not feel that it delivered something real, you get every dollar back. There is no risk in the financial sense. The only risk is continuing to do what you have already been doing and expecting a different result. One more thing before I move forward. There are imitations of this product circulating in various places online, and I want you to be careful. The Genius Wave that Dr. Rivers developed is a precisely calibrated audio tool, and versions of it that have been copied or approximated without the original research behind them will not deliver the same neurological effect. The only source I can vouch for is the single link in the pinned comment below this video. That is the only place I will ever direct you to access this. If you find it somewhere else at a different price or through a different channel, that is not the product I am describing. Please protect yourself by using only that link. The spots available at the $39 price point are limited, and once they are gone, the price returns to $49. If something in this message has already told you that this is a yes, do not wait. The part of you that already knows is the part you have been learning to trust. Trust it now. Before we move forward, I want to stay here for a moment. I want to resist the pull toward the next thing, the next idea, the next reframe, the next piece of information, because there is something that needs to be said slowly and without any rush toward resolution. What was just described in the previous section, the science, the tool, the possibility of what your brain is capable of when given the right frequency, all of that is real and all of that matters. But none of it means anything if we skip past what the waiting has actually taken from you. And I am not willing to skip past it. Not tonight. Not with you. There is a kind of spiritual content that moves too quickly toward the positive. It names the pain briefly, and then pivots almost immediately to the promise, as if sitting with the loss for too long is somehow a failure of faith. I understand why that happens. It is uncomfortable to stay in the difficult place. It is uncomfortable for the person speaking, and it is uncomfortable for the person listening. But the discomfort of sitting with the real cost of a long season is not something to move away from quickly. It is something to move through fully, because when you bypass the grief without honoring it, it does not disappear. It goes underground. And grief that goes underground does not stay quiet. It surfaces in ways you do not always recognize. In the cynicism that arrives when someone tries to encourage you, in the reflexive distrust of your own hope, in the exhaustion that has no clear source, because its source is the accumulated weight of loss that was never properly named. So I am going to name it now. I am going to name what the years have taken, specifically and honestly, without softening it into a lesson before you have had a chance to feel it as a loss. The years of waiting have taken relationships that could have been built. Not in some vague, theoretical sense, but in the most concrete and personal sense. There were people you could have been close to if you had been in a different season. There were connections that almost formed but dissolved because you were too depleted to sustain them, or because the circumstances of the waiting kept pulling you in a direction that made depth difficult. There were friendships that needed tending that did not get tended, not because you did not care, but because you were using everything you had just to keep moving forward. There were romantic possibilities that came and went during seasons when you were too lost in the weight of your own uncertainty to be fully present to another person. And some of those connections, if you are honest with yourself, are simply gone now. The window closed, the person moved on. The possibility that existed at a particular moment in time no longer exists because time moved and the moment did not wait. That is a real loss. It deserves to be called what it is. The years of waiting have also taken career ground that could have been covered. I am not talking about the motivational version of this, where the detour turns out to be the better path, though that may also be true. I am talking about the straightforward, unvarnished reality that while you were in the wilderness, other people were building. While you were surviving, they were advancing. While you were holding on, they were accumulating the kind of professional momentum that compounds over time. And you have watched that happen. You have sat in rooms or scrolled through feeds or received updates about people you started alongside, and you have felt the specific ache of seeing someone else occupy a version of your future, while you are still waiting for the present to shift. That ache is not jealousy in the ugly sense. It is grief. It is the grief of a life that has been on hold, and the grief is legitimate, and it does not need to be immediately transformed into a lesson about divine timing before you have had a chance to simply feel it as what it is. The years of waiting have taken the freedom to tell your big dreams out loud. This one is perhaps the most quiet of the losses, but it is one of the most corrosive. There was a time when you could speak about what you believed was coming for your life with a kind of open, unguarded excitement. You could describe the vision without managing the listener's reaction, without pre-empting the skepticism, without the defensive layer that comes from having been disappointed enough times that vulnerability around hope feels genuinely dangerous. That freedom is something the long seasons take. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but consistently. You learn to hold the dream more privately. You learn to speak about it in more qualified terms, or not to speak about it at all, because the cost of having it dismissed or minimized by someone who cannot see what you see has become higher than the cost of keeping it to yourself. And in that silence, in that protective withholding, something shrinks. Not the dream itself, but your relationship to the dream. The ease with which you once held it becomes effortful, and the effortfulness is its own kind of loss. And then there is the most personal thing the years have taken, the thing that is hardest to admit even to yourself. The waiting has, at various points and in various degrees, taken your faith in yourself, not your faith in God necessarily, or in the promise, or in the vision, but the quieter, more foundational faith that says, you are the right person for the life you have been called to. The doubt that moves into the space created by long seasons of waiting is not always the dramatic kind. It is not always the crisis of belief that announces itself clearly. More often it is a slow, subtle, insidious erosion of self-trust, a gradual accumulation of internal evidence that says maybe you were wrong about yourself. Maybe the things you believed about your capacity and your calling and your potential were not as solid as you thought. Maybe the waiting is not preparation. Maybe it is simply the natural result of not being quite enough, in quite the right way, at quite the right time. That voice is a liar, but it is a convincing one, especially after years of evidence that the waiting is not ending. And I will not minimize how much damage that voice has done, or pretend that naming it as a liar is sufficient to undo years of its work. The damage is real, the erosion is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged as such. I want to bring someone alongside you now, not to move past the pain, but to sit in it with you for a moment. Because the particular ache of a long and costly season is not something you are the first to carry. There is a man in the ancient text whose story I want to place next to yours, not because his story ended well, though it did, but because of the part of his story that came before the ending. His name was Joseph, and before anything else is said about him, I want you to know this. He was betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect him. He was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, the people who should have been his greatest advocates and his closest companions. He was sold. He was taken to a foreign country where he knew no one and nothing. He was falsely accused by someone he had served faithfully. He was imprisoned for something he did not do, and then he was forgotten by a man who had promised to remember him, who had every reason to speak on his behalf, who simply moved on and left Joseph in the prison without a second thought. The Bible does not rush past these things. It sits in them. It names them. It gives them the weight they deserve. Joseph sat in that prison for 2 years after the man who could have helped him forgot his name. 2 years of waiting, after years of waiting, after years of waiting. I am not going to tell you how the story ends tonight. I am going to leave you here, in the prison, in the forgetting, in the specific and grinding cost of a season that went on longer than anyone could have anticipated, because that is where you have been, and that place deserves to be honored before it is resolved. You have paid a price, a real one, measured in time and in relationships and in professional ground, and in the freedom to dream openly, and in the quiet faith in yourself that the long seasons erode. Every single thing that the waiting has cost you is real, and none of it needs to be minimized or bypassed or transformed too quickly into a lesson. You are allowed to grieve what the years have taken. You are allowed to sit in the loss before you step into the promise. In fact, I would argue that the sitting is necessary, that the honest acknowledgement of the cost is one of the conditions that makes the arrival real rather than performed. You cannot step fully into what is coming if you are still pretending that what was taken did not matter. It mattered. It all mattered. And the God who ordained the waiting has never been unaware of what it cost you. Not for a single day, not for a single hour. The cost was seen. Every loss was witnessed, and what is coming is not indifferent to what was paid. What is coming has been calibrated to the price. Every single year of it. The grief of the last section is real, and I am not going to ask you to leave it behind before you are ready. But I want to offer you something now. Not a replacement for the grief, but a new language for it. Because one of the cruelest things about a long season of waiting is not just the waiting itself. It is the absence of a framework that makes sense of it. When you do not have a way to understand what is happening to you, the mind fills the gap with the worst available explanation, which is usually that something is wrong with you, that you are the problem, that the delay is a verdict. And what I want to give you in this section is a different framework. Not a comfort that papers over the pain, but a genuine reorientation, a way of seeing this season that is older and deeper and truer than the story your circumstances have been telling you. I want to begin with a distinction that comes from the ancient Greek language, because the Greeks, who thought more carefully about the nature of time than almost any civilization before or since, had two entirely different words for it. And the difference between those two words is one of the most important things you will hear in this entire message. The first word is chronos. Chronos is clock time. It is the time that accumulates in days and weeks and months and years. It is the time that your birthday measures, and your calendar tracks, and your alarm clock governs. Chronos is sequential, mechanical, indifferent. It moves a fixed rate regardless of what is happening in your life or in your heart or in the invisible architecture of what God is building for you. Chronos does not care about your readiness. It does not pause for your preparation. It simply moves, one second after another, without regard for meaning or purpose or divine intention. When you measure your life by chronos, you are always either ahead of schedule or behind it. Always either catching up or falling further back, always in relationship to a timeline that has no awareness of you as a person. The second word is kairos, and kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not clock time. Kairos is the right time, the appointed time, the moment that arrives not because the calendar says it should, but because everything that needed to be in place is finally in place. Kairos is the time that carries meaning. It is the moment that has been prepared for, that arrives with weight and with purpose, and with the unmistakable sense that this, right here, is what everything was moving toward. The ancient Greeks used kairos to describe the moment in archery when the arrow passes through the gap in the weaving, the precise instant when the opening appears and the shot becomes possible. Before that instant, the shot cannot be taken. Not because the archer is not ready, but because the gap has not yet opened. And after that instant, the shot cannot be taken either, because the gap has already closed. Kairos is the moment of the gap, the moment of perfect alignment between preparation and opportunity, between the one who has been formed and the thing they have been formed for. You have been living in Chronos time and measuring yourself by it. You have been counting the years and finding yourself behind. You have been comparing your timeline to the timelines of people around you and concluding that the gap between where you are and where you expected to be is evidence of failure. But what if the time you have been measuring in Chronos is actually Kairos in disguise? What if the years that felt like accumulating delay were actually the precise and necessary formation of someone who will only be able to receive what is coming because of everything those years produced? The Chronos clock says you are behind. The Kairos reality says you are exactly on time. Not approximately, not close enough, exactly. To the moment, to the day. You are not standing at the edge of your season. You are standing inside the gap. The arrow is already passing through. Now I want to give you a second concept, this one from the ancient Hebrew language, because the Hebrew scriptures carry an understanding of waiting that the English word does not come close to capturing. And once you hear it, you will never read your season the same way again. In English, when we say someone is waiting, we mean they are in a state of suspension. They are paused. They are holding themselves in place while something external either happens or does not happen. Waiting in English is passive. It is the experience of time passing without agency, without movement, without contribution to the outcome. And that is the way most people in long seasons understand their waiting. They are paused. They are on hold. They are the ones who did not get the door opened for them yet, who did not get the call, who did not receive the breakthrough, and now they are simply existing in the space between the asking and the receiving. But the Hebrew word, that is, most often translated as waiting in the ancient text, is the word kava, and kava does not mean passive suspension. Kava means to twist together, to braid, to interweave multiple strands into something that is stronger than any single strand could be on its own. When the ancient Hebrews spoke of waiting on God, they were not describing a state of passive inactivity. They were describing an active, engaged, dynamic process of being braided, of having the separate threads of your life, your experience, your character, your capacity, your gifts, your wounds, your wisdom, your failures, your faith, twisted together in something that has a tensile strength it could not have had if any single thread had been removed. The waiting you have endured has not been passive. Even in the moments when it felt like nothing was happening, the braiding was happening. The strands were being twisted. The strength was being built. Every year that felt like suspension was actually a year of construction, of the invisible interior work of becoming someone whose life can hold the weight of what is coming. You are not delayed. You are being assembled, and the assembly is nearly complete. I want to bring these two concepts together now, Kairos and Kava, because they speak to each other in a way that I think will land with particular force for you in this moment. Kairos says there is an appointed time, a moment of perfect alignment that has been written into the fabric of your story from before you were born. Kava says that the time between the promise and the Kairos moment is not empty time. It is the time of braiding, of the active and sacred work of becoming someone who can step through the Kairos door without being destroyed by what is on the other side. Put those two things together and you have the full picture of your season. The Kairos moment is real. It has been set. It is coming with a precision that no amount of human delay can alter or cancel. And the waiting that has preceded it has been the Kava process, the sacred braiding of everything you are into the depth and the capacity that the Kairos moment requires. God did not set the appointed time without preparing the person for it. The preparation and the appointment are part of the same design. I want to speak now about what the ancient text calls the appointed time, with a directness that I think your season requires. There is a passage in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, where a man who has been waiting for what feels like an impossibly long time is told something that sounds almost unreasonable in its confidence. He is told that the vision has an appointed time, that it speaks of the end and will not prove false, that though it lingers, he should wait for it, because it will certainly come and will not delay beyond its appointed moment. I want you to sit with the audacity of that promise. Not just that the thing is coming, but that it will not delay beyond its appointed moment, which means the appointed moment is a fixed point. It is not a moving target. It is not a possibility that depends on your performance or your worthiness or the absence of your mistakes. It is an appointment, and what God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. What God has appointed, circumstance cannot revoke. The door that has been set for you has your name on it. And when the Kairos moment arrives, no force in the natural or the supernatural world will be able to prevent you from walking through it. Now, I want to bring you into the concept of what this season is at its deepest level so that you can stop fighting it and start inhabiting it with intention. The ancient pattern that appears throughout the scriptural text is a pattern of the wilderness season, the period of isolation, of disorientation, of the stripping away of every support structure that was never meant to be permanent. Moses in the desert for 40 years before the burning bush. David in the hills, running, hiding, waiting for a throne he had already been anointed to sit on. Jesus himself, driven into the wilderness before his public ministry began. The wilderness is not a detour from the story. The wilderness is where the story is formed. It is where the false versions of yourself are burned away. It is where the dependencies that would have compromised your future are dissolved. It is where you discover what you are made of when everything external that was propping you up has been removed, and you find, to your surprise and sometimes to your terror, that you are still standing. The desert is not a punishment. It is a preparation. And the fact that you are still standing after everything your wilderness has put you through is not evidence of stubbornness or of luck. It is evidence of what you are made of. It is evidence that the thing God placed inside you is not fragile. It is not conditional. It is not dependent on favorable circumstances to survive. It has survived unfavorable ones. That is the proof of its authenticity. That is the proof that what you carry is real. You are not someone who failed to escape the wilderness. You are someone who was taken into it deliberately, formed within it faithfully, and is now standing at its edge, looking at the territory that lies beyond it, ready in ways that you cannot yet fully see or articulate, but ready nonetheless. The Kairos moment does not ask you to feel ready, it asks you to step forward. And the Kava process has been building in you, strand by strand, year by year, the strength to take that step. Not every door comes from God, but the door that is opening for you now carries His peace. And somewhere in your body, in the place that has always known before your mind caught up, you already recognize it. There is something stirring in you right now, and I want you to name it honestly before we go any further. It is not quite hope, though hope is part of it. It is not quite certainty, though there is a certainty underneath it that is deeper than your doubts. It is something closer to recognition, the feeling of a truth arriving that you already knew but had not yet heard spoken out loud in a way that made it undeniable. That feeling is important. Do not dismiss it. Do not rationalize it away with the part of your mind that has learned to be careful about hope because hope has cost you before. What you are feeling right now is not naive. It is not the wishful thinking of someone who has not yet learned how hard things can be. You have learned how hard things can be. You have a doctorate in how hard things can be. What you are feeling right now is the recognition of someone who has been through enough to know the difference between a feeling that is manufactured and a feeling that is true. This one is true. Something inside you is moving because something outside you is moving, and the movement is not small. It is not incremental. It is the kind of movement that reorganizes everything around it. And I want to describe to you specifically, in the most concrete terms I can find, what that movement is going to look like in the 3 areas of your life that are about to transform. Before I name those 3 areas, I want to say something about the nature of this particular moment in your story, because understanding what kind of moment it is will help you navigate it without making the mistakes that this season most commonly invites. There is a specific kind of transition that happens when a long wilderness season ends and the Kairos moment arrives. It does not feel the way most people imagine it will feel. Most people imagine the breakthrough as a sudden and obvious event. A door swings open dramatically. The phone rings with the call they have been waiting for. The opportunity arrives in a form that is impossible to miss. And sometimes it does happen that way. But more often, the beginning of the greatest chapter of your life looks, from the outside, almost indistinguishable from an ordinary day. The difference is interior. The difference is a shift in frequency, in perception, in the way you are reading the signals that have always been there. The greatest chapter does not always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it begins with a quiet inner knowing that something has changed, and the confirmation comes later, after you have already begun to move in response to what you sensed. I feel something inside you that is coming, and I want to describe it in 3 specific and practical areas. The first area is relationships. What is about to change in your relational world is something that will initially look like loss before it becomes recognizable as liberation. There are people in your life right now who are going to begin to move away from you, not because of conflict, not because of anything dramatic or painful in the obvious sense, but simply because the season that brought you together has ended, and the next season requires a different kind of company. Some of these people are ones you care about genuinely. Some of them have been with you through portions of the wilderness that were genuinely difficult, and their departure will carry a grief that is real and that deserves to be honored. But I want you to understand something about the relational reorganization that comes with a Kairos moment. The people who are meant for the next chapter of your life cannot enter fully while the previous chapter's cast is still filling all the available space. The clearing that is happening is not abandonment. It is preparation. And what fills the space that opens will astonish you, because the connections that are coming are not the kind that require you to manage yourself down to be accepted. They are connections between people who are operating at the frequency you have been reaching toward your whole life. They will recognize you immediately. You will recognize them. There will be an ease to those connections that the difficult relational seasons have made it hard to believe is possible, because you have spent so long working so hard to be understood by people who were simply not calibrated to understand you. The new people are calibrated. They are coming. Some of them are already in your peripheral vision, people you have noticed but not yet moved toward. Connections that have been hovering at the edge of your world, waiting for you to step into the season that makes them possible. The second area is purpose. If there is one question that has haunted the waiting season more than any other, it is the question of what you are supposed to be doing. What is the specific thing, the particular contribution, the concrete expression of the calling you have carried all this time, but have never quite been able to translate into a clear and actionable direction? That question has been one of the most exhausting features of the wilderness, because it is not a question you could simply research your way to an answer on. It required a kind of interior clarity that the noise and the pressure and the depletion of the waiting season made almost impossible to access. But something is shifting in that now, and the shift is going to feel less like a dramatic revelation and more like a quiet settling. The question of what you should be doing is going to begin answering itself, not all at once, not in a single moment of blinding clarity, but in a sequence of small, clear, specific steps that arrive one at a time in a way you can actually follow. The first step will appear. It will be smaller than you expected. It will not look like the full vision. It will look like one actionable thing that you can do today, or this week, or in the next 30 days. And the temptation will be to dismiss it because it seems too small relative to the size of what you have been waiting for. Do not dismiss it. The Kairos door opens one step at a time, and the first step is always the one that looks like it cannot possibly be enough. It is enough. Take it. The next step will appear when you do. The third area is resources and opportunities. And this is the area where I want to be most careful with my language, because the prosperity framing that often surrounds messages like this one has done real damage to people who took it literally and then felt doubly betrayed when the miracle money did not arrive on schedule. So I want to be honest with you about what this shift actually looks like in practice. What is changing in the area of resources and opportunities is not primarily the quantity of what is available to you. It is your relationship to what is available. One of the most consistent features of the wilderness season is a sense of striving, of having to fight for every inch of ground, of needing to exhaust yourself to produce even modest results, of pouring enormous energy into efforts that yield disproportionately small returns. That dynamic is about to change, not because the world is going to suddenly become easier or more generous in some abstract sense, but because you are moving into alignment with the specific opportunities that were designed for the specific version of you that the wilderness has been producing. When you are in the wrong season trying to force outcomes that belong to the next season, everything is hard because you are pushing against the grain of what is actually moving. When you step into the right season, into the Kairos moment that has been set for you, the same amount of effort produces radically different results because you are finally moving with the current rather than against it. You are not going to have to fight for what belongs to you in the next chapter. You are going to have to learn how to receive it, which for someone who has spent years in survival mode and effortful striving is actually its own kind of challenge. But it is a good challenge. It is the challenge of someone who is finally in the right place, at the right time doing the right thing. Now, I want to tell you what not to do during this period, because the transition between seasons is the most vulnerable moment in the entire journey, and there are specific mistakes that people make in this window that delay or diminish what is arriving. Do not make any permanent decisions based on the emotions of the transition. The transition period carries a heightened emotional intensity that is real and that is meaningful, but that is not always the most reliable guide for permanent choices. Let the clarity settle before you make the irreversible moves. The urgency you feel is real, but the best responses to genuine Kairos moments are rarely made in a state of high emotional activation. Be still enough to hear the specific step before you leap toward the entire vision. Do not isolate yourself in this period. The temptation during a season of significant interior shift is to withdraw completely, to protect the fragile new thing that is emerging from the noise and the skepticism of the outside world. Some degree of protective stillness is appropriate and wise, but complete isolation during a transition season cuts you off from the very connections that the new chapter requires. Stay available. Stay gently open. You do not need to explain everything to everyone, but do not disappear entirely into the interior. Do not go back. This is perhaps the most important instruction of all. When the transition becomes uncomfortable, When the old life calls with the familiarity that discomfort always makes appealing, do not go back. The wilderness is behind you. The people and the patterns and the versions of yourself that belong to that season are behind you. The door that is opening is in front of you, and it opens forward. Resist the pull backward. The comfort you remember from the old season was never as good as the discomfort of the transition is making it seem. And above all, do not stop now. You are too close. The greatest chapter of your life is not somewhere in the vague future. It is being written tonight. You are already in it. The pen is already moving. If something in these words has landed in the place where you have been most afraid to hope, I want you to do something right now. Type the word "receive" in the comments. Not as a performance, as a declaration, as the first word of the chapter that begins tonight. You have done the hard work. You have paid the price. You have been braided and formed and made ready. Now receive. It is yours. It has always been yours. And it is here. You typed that word, or you felt it rise in you, even if your fingers did not move. And something in that act of receiving is already doing its work. I want you to stay inside the feeling of it for a moment before we go any further. Because what just happened in the previous section was not small. You were asked to declare yourself open to something you have protected yourself from for a long time. And the fact that you did it, even tentatively, even with the residual guardedness of someone who has hoped before and been disappointed before, significant. It is the kind of significance that does not always feel large in the moment, but that the future will look back on as a turning point. So before I say anything else, I want to honor that. You showed up, you stayed, you reached, and in a season that has tested your capacity to keep reaching, that is not a small thing. That is everything. What I want to give you now is a name, not a label, not a category, not a box to put yourself in, but a name for the specific version of yourself that the wilderness has been producing. The person who is standing here tonight, having survived what you survived, and having arrived at this threshold with your faith still intact, your hope still present beneath the scar tissue, your calling still burning underneath everything that has tried to extinguish it. Every season of formation produces a specific kind of person, and the kind of person your season has been forming deserves to be named with precision and with honor. The name I want to give you tonight is this. You are a peace carrier. And I want to explain exactly what that means, because this name is not decorative. It is descriptive. It is a description of something specific and extraordinary that your life has been doing, much of it without your conscious awareness, and that the next chapter of your life will continue to do with increasing intentionality and with increasing power. A peace carrier is not someone who has never been broken. A peace carrier is not someone who floated through their season without wounds or without cost. A peace carrier is someone who went through the full weight of what the wilderness delivers, the isolation, the confusion, the grief, the erosion of certainty, the relentless pressure of a season that went on longer than anyone should have to endure, and came out the other side carrying something that the wilderness, despite everything it tried, could not take from them. That something is peace. Not the peace of someone who has never suffered. The peace of someone who has suffered fully and discovered that they are still standing. That is a completely different and infinitely more powerful thing. The world around you is full of noise. It is full of people who are moving fast and speaking loudly and filling every available silence with activity, because silence has become something that most people are genuinely afraid of. And into that noise, into those spaces that are so full of frantic energy that no one can hear themselves think, you walk carrying something that most people have forgotten is even possible. You carry a settled quality, a groundedness, a capacity to be present in a moment of chaos without being consumed by it, to hold a stillness in a room that was not there before you arrived, to speak from a depth that cuts through the surface noise because it comes from somewhere below it. You did not develop that capacity by having an easy life. You developed it by surviving a hard one. Every season that threatened to destroy your peace and did not. Every moment when the pressure was at its highest and you found, to your own surprise, that something in you held was adding to the carrier capacity you now possess. You are not just someone who has peace. You are someone who generates it in the spaces around you. You are someone whose presence changes the quality of a room. That is what a peace carrier does. That is what you have been doing, even in the seasons when you felt like you had nothing left to give. Even in your most depleted moments, you were carrying something that the people around you needed and could not produce on their own. The next chapter of your life is going to give that capacity a stage that matches its size. Now I want to do something with you that I want you to take seriously, even if this kind of exercise is not something you are accustomed to. I want to lead you through a visualization, a guided moment of interior seeing, because there are things that the imagination can access that the analytical mind cannot reach, and what I am about to describe to you is something your soul already knows, but that your conscious mind may need help seeing clearly. Close your eyes if you are able. Take one breath that is slower and deeper than the ones that have been coming before it. And picture yourself standing at a threshold. Not a metaphorical one in the abstract sense, but a specific, sensory, fully imagined one. You are standing in a doorway. The door itself is open. It has been opened for you. You did not have to force it. You did not have to break it down. It opened because the Kairos moment arrived, and the door that was appointed for you recognized the person who was appointed for it. You are standing in the frame of that doorway, and I want you to notice two things in sequence. First, look back, not with regret, not with longing, but with the clear eyes of someone who is far enough along to see the full shape of the journey. What do you see behind you? You see the wilderness. You see the long stretches of road that looked exactly the same for years at a time, where the landmarks were so sparse that you sometimes wondered whether you were moving at all. You see the places where you sat down because you were too tired to keep walking, and then stood back up because something inside you would not let you stay down. You see the relationships that came and went. You see the versions of yourself that you had to leave behind, not because they were bad, but because they were not built for where you were going. You see the prayers that felt like they went unanswered, and from where you are standing now, at the threshold, you can begin to see what those prayers were actually doing, even when they seemed to be disappearing into silence. They were not disappearing. They were accumulating. They were building the infrastructure of what you are stepping into, every single one of them. Look at it all. Honor it, and then do the second thing. Look up, not back, up, through the open door into the territory that lies ahead. And notice what you feel when you look, not what you think. Not what you can logically analyze or project or plan, what you feel, because the body knows things about the future that the mind has not yet been told, and the feeling that rises in you when you look through that open door is information. It is reliable information. It is the feeling of recognition, of a life that has your name on it, of a chapter that was written with your specific gifts and your specific wounds and your specific history in mind, and that no one else could live because it was designed for the precise and particular person that the wilderness made you into. You are not looking at someone else's future through that door. you are looking at yours. Let that truth be as large as it actually is. Do not manage it down to a size that feels safer. Let it fill the space it was always meant to fill. And now notice where you are standing. You are not outside the door, looking at it from a distance. You are not still in the wilderness, looking at the door from across a field. You are in the frame. You are already at the threshold. The crossing has already begun. The step is not something that requires a massive gathering of courage and a dramatic leap into the unknown. The step is already happening. You are already inside the beginning of the greatest chapter of your life. You have been inside. It's since the moment you showed up here tonight. The recognition you are feeling is not the feeling of anticipating something that is still coming. It is the feeling of realizing that it has already started. And you, the peace carrier, are already standing in the light of it. Open your eyes when you are ready and carry that image with you. The open door, the wilderness behind you, honored and released. The territory ahead of you, yours and specific and waiting. And you, standing in the frame, already crossing, already inside the beginning, already carrying into the next chapter, the one thing that the wilderness could not take and the world cannot manufacture. Your peace, your settled, hard-won, wilderness-forged, unshakable peace. I want to close this section with something that is less a teaching and more a blessing, because I think after everything you have heard tonight and everything you have carried into this moment, what you need from me right now is not more information. It is simply this. May the clarity that has been building in you find its full and unobstructed expression in the days ahead. May the connections that belong to your next chapter arrive with a speed and an ease that surprises you. May the purpose that has been forming in the quiet of the wilderness years step forward into the light with a confidence that matches the preparation that produced it. May the resources that belong to your next season recognize you and find you without you having to exhaust yourself in the pursuit of them. May the grief of what was taken be honored fully enough that it releases its grip on the energy you need for what is coming. May the faith in yourself that the long seasons eroded be rebuilt, quietly and steadily, with every small step you take in the right direction. May the people around you begin to see in you what you have always known was there, but rarely felt permission to show. And may tonight be the night that you stop measuring your life by the clock of Chronos and begin to live inside the appointed time of Kairos, where you have always been known and where everything that is coming for you has been waiting with a patience that mirrors the patience you have shown. You are a peace carrier. The peace you carry is not yours alone. It belongs to every room you walk into, every person you sit with, every broken and exhausted and wilderness-weary soul that your life is about to intersect with. You survived the wilderness, not just for yourself. You survived it so that you could carry something through to the other side that others desperately need. And that carrying begins tonight. The blessing at the end of the last section was not a closing. It was a commissioning. And I want you to feel the difference between those two things. Because a closing is something that ends, something that wraps up and releases you back into your ordinary life unchanged. A commissioning is something that sends you forward with a specific assignment, a specific direction, a specific understanding of what you are walking into and what is expected of you when you get there. What happened in part 8 was not the end of this conversation. It was the moment where the conversation became a mandate. And now, I want to give you the most practical section of everything we have covered tonight, because the peace carrier that you are does not only carry something interior and invisible. The peace carrier takes specific, concrete, actionable steps in the world. And those steps begin right now, today. in the next 24 hours, in the next 7 days, in the specific and ordinary circumstances of your actual life as it actually exists. Before I describe the 3 areas that are about to transform, I want to say something about the nature of practical action in a Kairos season, because there is a way of approaching practical step will accelerate what is coming, and a way of approaching them that will create friction where there does not need to be any. The way that creates friction is the way of the wilderness season, the way of striving, of pushing, of forcing outcomes through sheer effort and willpower, of measuring your progress by how hard you are working, rather than by how aligned you are with what is actually moving. That approach served a purpose in the wilderness. It kept you alive. It kept you moving when everything in you wanted to stop. But it is not the approach of the Kairos season, and if you carry it forward unchanged into the next chapter, you will spend enormous energy producing results that should have come easily, because you are applying a survival strategy to a season that calls for a receptivity strategy. The shift I am asking you to make is not from effort to passivity. It is from striving to alignment, from pushing to positioning, from forcing the door to walking through the one that is already open. Here is what you need to do right now. Practical actions that can begin today, organized around the 3 areas that are in the process of transformation. The first area is relationships, and the practical action here is one that will feel counterintuitive if you have spent the wilderness season in protective isolation. The action is this: identify one person in your life, just one, who has been circling the edges of a deeper connection with you, but whom you have kept at a careful distance, because the cost of being truly known by someone and then losing them has felt too high. You know who I am talking about. There is someone specific who came to mind when I said that, someone whose name or face or the memory of a recent conversation appeared in your awareness before I had finished the sentence. That person is not a coincidence. The connection that has been hovering between you and that specific person is part of the relational reorganization that the Kairos season initiates. Your practical action this week is to close the distance by one deliberate step, not a grand gesture, not a vulnerable disclosure that requires you to hand them your entire interior world in a single conversation. One step, a message that says something real, an invitation to a conversation that goes below the surface. A simple act of showing up for them in a way that costs you something. Because showing up in ways that cost you something is how the connections of the next chapter are built. They are not built on convenience. They are built on chosen presence. And the peace carrier that you are has the capacity for chosen presence that most people spend their entire lives wishing they could find in another person. Give that capacity to one person this week. Watch what it opens. At the same time, I want to give you the complementary action, which is about the relationships that need to be gently released. There is at least one connection in your life right now that you have been maintaining out of obligation, or out of guilt, or out of the fear that letting it breathe would mean losing it entirely. A relationship that consistently leaves you more depleted than when you entered it, that asks for more than it gives, that pulls you back toward the version of yourself that belongs to the previous season, rather than forward toward the version that is emerging. I am not asking you to end anything dramatically. I am asking you to stop investing energy in maintaining the artificial closeness of a connection that has run its natural course. Stop initiating. Stop over-explaining. Stop making yourself smaller to fit into a dynamic that was built for a smaller version of you. Simply allow the natural distance to exist and trust that what falls away in the process of you stepping into your next season was not built to last into it. The relationships that belong in the next chapter will not fall away when you stop forcing them. They will move closer. The second area is purpose, and the practical action here is simpler and more specific than you might expect. I am not asking you to write a 5-year plan. I am not asking you to build a complete vision board or map out the entire trajectory of your calling from beginning to end. I am asking you to identify one small, specific, concrete thing that you have been putting off because it felt too small relative to the size of what you believe you are called to, and to do that thing this week. Just that one thing. The email you have been meaning to send. The conversation you have been meaning to have. The first page of the thing you have been meaning to write. The first session of the practice you have been meaning to start. The single phone call that would move one important thing forward by one important inch. That is it. That is the whole assignment. Because the Kairos season does not begin with a dramatic leap into the full vision. It begins with the first small step taken in full faith that the next step will become visible when you take it. The chosen ones who step into their greatest chapter are not the ones who had the most comprehensive plan. They are the ones who took the first available step without waiting for certainty about every subsequent one. Take the step. The next one will appear. And I want to say something specific about the relationship between purpose and the daily threshold practice that I gave you, because they are connected in a way that is directly relevant to this practical section. The 7 minutes of intentional stillness that you learned earlier in this message is not separate from the process of discovering and living your purpose. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which your purpose becomes clear. When the brain is operating in the elevated gamma frequency that the genius wave is specifically designed to activate, the kind of integrative processing that produces clarity of direction becomes accessible in a way that the scattered, stressed, ordinary waking state does not permit. People who use the genius wave consistently report that the question of what they are supposed to be doing, which was one of the most persistent and exhausting features of their wilderness season, begins to answer itself with a specificity and a quietness that surprises them, not because the audio is doing the thinking for them, but because it is giving the brain the frequency it needs to do. The thinking it was always capable of but was never quite resourced to complete. The clarity of purpose that you have been reaching toward is not absent. It is waiting for the right neurological tensions to become accessible. 7 minutes a day is the investment that creates those conditions. The third area is resources and opportunities, and the practical action here requires a shift in orientation that will feel strange at first, but that will become more natural with practice. The shift is this: stop looking for opportunities and start becoming visible to them. These sound like the same thing, but they are not. Looking for opportunities is an outward-facing, effortful, scanning activity that puts you in a posture of seeking, of reaching, of going after something that is somewhere out there and that you need to hunt down. Becoming visible to opportunities is a different posture entirely. It is about showing up fully and authentically in the spaces where you already are, contributing at the level of your actual capacity rather than the managed down level that the wilderness season trained you to present, and trusting that the opportunities that are aligned with who you actually are will be able to find you when you stop hiding the real version of yourself behind the safer, smaller version that you developed as a protective strategy during the hard years. What does that look like in practice? It looks like speaking up in the room where you have been staying quiet, It looks like putting your name forward for the thing you have been watching others pursue while telling yourself you were not quite ready. It looks like sharing the work, the idea, the gift, the perspective that you have been keeping private because you were not sure the world was ready for it or that you were ready to offer it. The world is ready. You are ready. The peace carrier does not hide the peace they carry. They bring it into the rooms that need it most, and those rooms will begin to find you with an increasing frequency and an increasing specificity as you step more fully into the visibility that the next chapter requires. I also want to say something about money, specifically, because the resource area of transformation is often the one people are most to claim, because it feels the most materialistic, the most at odds with the spiritual language of everything else we have discussed tonight. But I want to be clear that the resources that belong to your next chapter are not a reward for spiritual performance. They are the natural consequence of alignment. When you are doing the specific thing you were designed to do in the specific way you were designed to do it for the specific people who need what only you can provide, the resources that sustain that work arrive. Not always dramatically, not always in the form you expect, but consistently and with a directness that the wilderness season did not permit, because the wilderness season was specifically designed to break your dependence on resources as a source of security so that you could receive them in the next season as a tool for purpose rather than a substitute for it. You are not going to have to fight for what belongs to you. You are going to have to practice receiving it without the guilt and the discomfort that the scarcity years installed in you around abundance. That is the real work of this area, not the finding, the receiving. And through all three of these areas, through the relational reorganization and the purposeful first steps and the shift from striving to visibility, I want you to carry one thing with you as a compass. Not a feeling, because feelings fluctuate. Not a plan, because plans require revision. A single, steady, orienting truth that you can return to whenever the transition becomes confusing or frightening or louder than the peace you carry. The truth is this: you were not brought through the wilderness to be abandoned at the threshold. Everything that formed you was forming you for this. Every year of the waiting was a year of the braiding. Every closed door was protecting the energy you needed for the open one. And the God who ordained the appointed time has not changed the appointment. Tonight, the greatest chapter of your life is being written. And you, peace carrier, are not a passive subject in that story. You are its active, prepared, wilderness forged, Kairos positioned protagonist. Act like it, step like it, receive like it, and watch what happens when a person who has been fully formed finally steps into the life they were fully formed for. We have traveled a long distance together tonight, and I do not want to move through this final section quickly. I want to stay here with you, in this space, for as long as it takes to say what needs to be said, because what happens in the last moments of a message like this one matters more than most people realize. The way a conversation ends is the way it lives in you afterward, and I want this one to live in you well. I want it to settle into the part of you that will still be carrying it. 3 days from now, when the ordinary world has reasserted itself and the practical demands of your life have crowded back in, and the feelings of tonight has begun to fade at the edges, the way all feelings eventually do. I want what was planted here to have roots deep enough to survive the return of the ordinary, because the ordinary is coming. And the ordinary is where the real work of the greatest chapter always gets done. So let me begin this final section with something that I mean with more sincerity than almost anything else I have said tonight. Thank you. Not a performative thank you. Not the kind of thank you that functions as a transition into the next point. A genuine, specific, personal thank you directed at the part of you that showed up here tonight, despite having every reasonable excuse not to. Because I know what it costs to keep showing up when the showing up has not yet produced the results you were showing up for. I know what it takes to keep your heart open, enough to receive a message like this one when your history has given you legitimate reasons to close it. I know how much courage it requires to sit still long enough to let words find the tender places, the unresolved places, the places that have been waiting so long to be named that they ache when something finally touches them. You did that tonight. You let this reach you. And the part of you that made that choice, the part that kept listening even when another part of you was composing reasons to stop, that part is the truest and the bravest part of you. I want to honor it directly before this message ends. You are not alone. I want to say that again with the full weight of what I mean by it. Right now, in this exact moment, as these words reach you, there are chosen ones all across the world who are walking into this same message. In apartments in cities you will never visit, in houses on roads you will never drive down, in small rooms in countries whose languages you do not speak. There are people sitting exactly as you are sitting, feeling exactly what you are feeling, carrying exactly the combination of exhaustion and hope and grief and readiness that you are carrying tonight. They are peace carriers in their own specific and irreplaceable way. They have been through their own wilderness, paid their own price, and arrived at their own threshold at the same appointed time that brought you to yours. You are not an isolated case. You are not the exception in a world full of people who are doing fine. You are part of a generation of chosen ones who have been formed in the wilderness for a specific moment in the history of the world. And that moment is now, and you are in it together, even across the distances that make it feel like you are in it alone. I want to give you one more thing before this message ends, and it is an exercise, a final act of intentional release that I want to invite you into right now. In whatever space you are physically occupying as you receive these words, I want you to imagine, as vividly as you can, that you are standing once more at the threshold we visited in the last section. The open door is still there. The wilderness is still visible behind you. The territory ahead is still waiting. But this time, I want you to notice something you are carrying, not in your hands, on your back. The accumulated weight of everything that the wilderness season has deposited in you that does not belong in the next chapter. The grievances that have calcified into resentment, the disappointments that have hardened into cynicism, the wounds that have closed around themselves into walls, the fear that has been performing as protection for so long that you have almost forgotten it is fear. The heaviness of a hope that has been deferred so many times that it has started to carry the weight of all its previous disappointments, along with whatever remains of its original lightness. I want you to feel the full weight of all of that, not to condemn yourself for carrying it, because you carried it for survival, and survival required it, but to recognize it for what it is, not armor, weight. And you are standing at a threshold now, and the threshold has a floor, and the floor can hold what you lay down on it. So lay it down, all of it. Not because the wounds were not real, they were. Not because the disappointments did not happen, they did. Not because the grief is not legitimate, it is. But because the door that is open in front of you leads to a chapter that does not require you to carry the previous one's weight into it. The greatest chapter of your life was not written for someone weighed down by everything the previous chapters cost. It was written for the person who arrived at the threshold, having honored the cost fully and then made the decision to set it down and step through unencumbered. That person is you, tonight. In this moment, set it down. Take one breath without the weight of it, and then look at the door. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to do it, not because I am asking, but because it is one of the most powerful things you can do right now for someone who is sitting exactly where you were sitting when this message found you. Like this video if something in it met you tonight, not as a gesture of approval for the production or the presentation, as a signal to whatever system is listening that this kind of content deserves to travel further, that there are more chosen ones who need to be found by it, that the message you received tonight is worth sending to the next person who is sitting in the dark, without anyone to name what they are carrying. Share it with one person, just one. The person who came to mind somewhere in the middle of this message, the one you thought of when I described the recurring sadness, or the familiar places that feel strange, or the dream of the unopened door. Send it to them, without explanation. Let it find them the way it found you. Subscribe to this channel so that the next message can reach you without you having to search for it. Because this is not the last thing that needs to be said, and you are not done growing into the person the next chapter requires. There is more, and it is coming, and I want it to find you easily. And if something moved in you tonight that went beyond words, if you felt something shift in a way that you want to honor with more than a like or a share, consider supporting this. Work through the donation link that is available to you, not for me, so that this message can reach another chosen one who is walking into their Monday morning without anyone to name what they are carrying, who is sitting in a car in a parking lot trying to gather the strength to go back inside, who is lying awake at 3 in the morning with a weight on their chest that they cannot name and a hope they cannot quite let go of. Your generosity is not just a financial act, it is a spiritual one. It is you saying that what was given to you tonight is worth passing on, and it is worth passing on. You know it is. Before I say one final thing, I want to mention something without pressure and without force, simply because it belongs in this conversation, and I would be leaving something out if I did not name it. The genius wave met some of you somewhere in the middle of this message tonight. You felt something shift when the science of brainwave frequency was connected to the spiritual reality of who you are and what you carry. You recognize the 7-minute practice as something that belongs in your daily life from this point forward. If that recognition is present in you, if something inside you is already saying yes, then the genius wave is waiting for you in the pinned comment below this video. The link is there. The 90-day guarantee is there. The $39 access price is there for a limited time. And the version of you that uses it consistently for next 30 days is closer to the greatest chapter of your life than the version that does not. I trust you to know whether this is a yes for you. And if it is, do not wait. Now, here is the last thing, the very last thing. And it is not information. It is not instruction. It is not a call to action. It is simply the thing that I want to be the final word that walks with you out of this message and into whatever comes next. You came here tonight carrying something. You leave here carrying something different. Not lighter necessarily, though some of the weight may have shifted. Different. More named, more understood, more seen. The greatest chapter of your life is not a reward for your suffering. It is the natural expression of who your suffering made you into. And who your suffering made you into is someone the world needs with an urgency that matches the length of the preparation. Go be that person, tonight, tomorrow, in every ordinary moment that the greatest chapter gets built inside of. Go be exactly, fully, unapologetically that person, The pen is in God's hand. The page is already turning, and your name is at the top of every line. A final, hidden, light blessing. Carry it with you without knowing its full weight until the moment you need it most. May every good thing that was spoken over you tonight find its way to you in a form you can actually receive. May the part of you that almost did not show up tonight be glad forever that it did. May you sleep tonight with the particular peace of someone who has been found, and may you wake tomorrow as what you have always been and are only now beginning to fully become. Chosen, formed, ready, loved beyond the reach of any season that tried to tell you otherwise. Go well, peace carrier. The greatest chapter has already begun.